I see companies struggling to drive results from organic search every single day. They know how SEO works. They produce content, they fix technical issues, and they build links, but none of that cuts it. Why? Because they're focusing on a large pool of SEO tasks that don't move the business needle. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly why your SEO plan is not driving results because you're focusing on the wrong thing. See, when it comes to any SEO plan, you need to think about three different segments when it comes to implementation, right? So the problem with the SEO industry is that there's just too much noise and everything feels like a ranking factor. I think maybe it was more than a decade ago when the 200 ranking factors list came out and everyone started using that terminology. That's where the deception happens, in my opinion, right? Because everyone thinks there are literally hundreds of factors that contribute to SEO success, and that actually is true. The problem, though, is that not everything out of those factors matter. The weightage when it comes to each of the factors influencing SEO success is very different. So when I'm working with a new company and it looks like they have been trying to do SEO, trying to succeed with search, one of the most common problems I see is that they just feel like they have been doing things which in their opinion should matter based on the consumption of information they've done on the internet, right? So they've looked at a bunch of YouTube videos, they've tried to understand SEO maybe from a bunch of blog posts, and they feel like all tags are really important. And now that's what they're going to focus on. So the way I think about focusing on stuff that actually matters is in three different segments. And I'm going to just paint a picture here so that you can see it visually. We'll call it the mental model needed to action an SEO plan, right? So mental model for SEO success. So if you think about it visually, right, I think there are three layers, and this is exactly how I work with clients, by the way, when I'm trying to build this strategy and design their implementation program. So number one is, if you imagine a circle, right, this massive circle, where you have a lot of stuff that you can potentially work on. This is the first layer, which includes almost everything there is for you to action on within the SEO universe. Now, this is what I call the unlimited stream of ideas, right? I would bucket them and label them as maybe, let's say, best practices. I know, terrible handwriting, by the way. So all of this massive pond of ideas is going to be everything that we can call a best practice, right? Stuff that feels like is going to be important for SEO. Let's think, for example, alt tags, right? Adding those to images, no one will disagree that could be important, right? In some scenarios, it's never a bad practice. Adding keywords to specific pages, or for example, fixing broken links, stuff like that. So very tactical things, and maybe also some strategic ones, but it's basically just including everything. So it's a massive universe of ideas, predominantly best practices, right? So let's just use that wording. Now, within this massive circle is what I call the stuff where you focus on the objective. So I'm going to maybe draw another circle within this, right? So let's say we can use the label maybe focused on the objective, right? So perhaps we can write objective focused, meaning this is where all of the stuff comes in, which is directly tied to the goals that you're trying to achieve. An example of this could be that, let's say you have a website with a lot of content, but it's not necessarily optimized for search in the best shape possible. It's not necessarily ranking on the first page, not driving traffic. So content optimization becomes a part of this circle, which is tied to your objective to drive more traffic, if it's your objective, right? But when it comes to maybe broken links, right, it's not directly going to optimize for the objective that you have, the end goal that you have, which in this case we're assuming to be more traffic or more conversions or whatever, right? So these two layers help you decide what is the stuff that is directly going to move the needle based on what I'm trying to achieve versus what is just generally a good idea, right? So as I said, maybe fixing broken links, 404 pages, maybe putting some redirects, all of that stuff still is an SEO practice, but not necessarily going to move the needle that you're trying to move here in this particular instance. So that's where I think just drawing this picture of objective focused activities is important. Just adds another layer of clarity. And then the third circle, in my opinion, is where the actual magic happens. and this is again some stuff that most of the companies miss, in my opinion. Just like looking at this massive universe of ideas, they're like, hey, how can we do everything in the best shape possible, etc., without realizing that they have one massive constraint, which is we're gonna call it. How do I draw another circle here? So it's gonna be. Can you guess? It's resources, right? So resources mean this is all the stuff that you can potentially realistically accomplish. Now, again, tying back to these other two layers that we've drawn, best practices could be anything that seems like a general idea, still related to SEO success, but may not be relevant in your particular case. Objective specific items are going to be focused on the stuff that you're trying to achieve. So if you have a small site and you think working on technical SEO is a best practice, then it is a best practice, but may not be relevant to you because your objective is focused on driving more traffic. Technical SEO will only leverage growth for maybe larger sites, and you have a smaller site. And then the third stuff could be resources. An example of this could be that, let's say you have an early stage company. You're just getting off the ground, you're building the foundations, and you see this programmatic SEO opportunity in your space, right? You feel like, hey, we have, just tons of search volume for this particular keyword syntax, this repeated keyword pattern, and we can totally capture that search demand by just creating a bunch of pages. Maybe the problem is that you need a developer, right? And you don't have the resources because you're just an early stage company with not a lot of budget. So that would be one restriction. Maybe you don't have any proprietary data that is needed to build those pages, to build that programmatic SEO program. So all of that just instantly becomes irrelevant as soon as you realize what are your constraints. That's how I think about it. Now, if we were to add another layer of labels here, just to add more clarity, I would say in simple language, right? Just going back to the same layers, best practices is all of the stuff that you should do, right? So it's all the stuff that someone says, hey, you should do this. You should optimize your website. You should optimize your website for speed. You should fix this technical SEO problem. You should maybe run this error, technical SEO audit. You should fix these errors inside Google Search Console. All of that stuff, right? So all of these shoulds, in my opinion, is just going to be the stuff that is classified under best practices. Sure, one can debate it's important, but it's not going to be important in your particular instance if you're just getting started, or maybe if you have larger priorities. So it's all the stuff that you should do, not necessarily the stuff that you need to do. So the next one, in simple language, objective focused activities can be said to be, or can be labeled as all the stuff that will have an impact. So this will be maybe impactful activities. So this is all the stuff that we know is gonna definitely move the needle for your business in some shape or form, depending on what your objective is. So if your objective is to drive more traffic, or maybe improve your conversion rate, or perhaps drive more demos or whatever, right? Then we definitely know that optimizing content that is not yet optimized, not driving the highest amount of traffic, but has a proclivity to drive conversions, is surely going to be impactful. We have absolute certainty, the data is clear, we can definitely see that it's going to move the needle for us. Now, there are so many other best practices that you can potentially work on, but you don't have to because you have a larger priority, which is certainly going to be impactful. So you have evidence that this is where the money is. Now, using this as a filter, you can then think of the next layer, which will decide exactly what you have to work on, which is resources, which can be labeled as all the stuff that you can do. So I'm just gonna write can do, right? So just think in simple language. You want to work on these re-optimization pieces. You have this content audit that you've run and you've found a bunch of pages. You think you're gonna drive traffic. You have very clear evidence that it's going to result in more conversions if you just drive more eyeballs towards these set of pages. Now, can you do it? Do you have all the resources? Do you have the writers? Do you have the editing mechanism that you need in-house? Do you have those workflows? If any of that is a constraint, then that is not the stuff that you should be thinking about. Sure, if anyone comes in as a consultant and you start working with someone and they say, hey, have you thought about optimizing content? Then you can say, yes, we have. We know why it's important. We know it's definitely a practice that will drive results. It's tied with our objective. The problem is that we don't have the resources. So what are we doing? We're just creating more. Or maybe we are working on original research, which can potentially drive us more links because we cannot afford manual outreach, whatever, right? So just thinking of all the stuff that you can do, which happens to be a subset of all of the impactful work that you can theorize, right? Which generally falls into the broader bucket of best practices. That's where you're going to make the money. I've found this exact framework as a mental model to be really, really helpful, simply because when you're trying to build anything, if it's a strategy for organic search, maybe for any other channel, if it's anything, to be honest, the biggest challenge is focus. So this framework has helped me think about anything that is simply a no, right? I don't have to think about it. I don't have to answer to anyone else, constantly just explaining why this is a decision that we've made. We have a ton of clarity on what stuff we need to work on and why. And if you really think about some real world scenarios, when you're working with a company, for example, I do a lot of consulting. I also work with this agency and we have a lot of clients. There's a lot of movement happening in companies, and the context is completely shifting every few days, few months, right? For example, maybe this new VP of marketing comes in and they're just evaluating everything that you've done, and they're now questioning your ability based on the roadmap that you've created and implemented, without totally realizing that maybe there were actual constraints from the client side, from your side, and stuff that made sense, didn't make sense, etc. So if you already had clarity on why something was deprioritized, because of course it's important, but not necessarily the urgent need, you can just explain it to them very, very easily, right? Because you have clarity here. I'll give you one last example that will paint a picture for all of these three layers. So I am currently working with a company where we have mutually decided with the client that we're gonna build a product page oriented strategy. Why we did that? Because we realized that that's where the money is, right? They happen to be growing constantly when it comes to landing pages. Informational content is going down. So they decided, let's just put more focus towards product pages because we haven't really captured all of the potential search demand that we can capture on the commercial keyword side. Now, why that is relevant? Because I think this exact framework was at play working with this company. So we have the should do layer, right? All of the best practices. When we presented this implementation plan finally, right, where we said, hey, we're going to work on these pages. This is how we're going to work on it. We're going to keep all of the pages the same. And in terms of structure, the layout, etc. And finally, their team started shipping things. We started giving them the roadmap of implementation idea, everything basically they need to make the changes to the pages, right, to get them up and running. We had some pushback from the team. And they were like, hey, so you've provided us with these layouts of the pages, and they seem like they're all pretty much the same when it comes to the look and feel, the structure, the overall hierarchy of the pages. And shouldn't these pages differ based on, the underlying search intent and stuff like that? Now, in theory, that is true, right? As in, if I had the chance to just create separate layouts, completely different designs for each of the landing page. And by the way, these are all product pages, right? So all happen to be a part of commercial keywords, nothing informational in nature. Anyways, so if I had the chance to just create those layers and say, hey, for each of these 50 different keywords that we're giving you, different pages that we want to build, we want a separate design, that would have been ideal. But is that really practical? Is that something that I can do, right? And the answer was definitely no. Their team totally stretched thin. Their design team was working on a ton of other things. And the answer was, of course, obvious. They're not going to have the bandwidth to work with us to create 50 different variations for these landing pages. So even if that means that we rank maybe 2 spots low on Google, in aggregate, that's still helpful if you can just ship things now without waiting for the design team to be in an ideal situation. So that's where this, can do function really helped. At the same time, for the same company, we also had some pushback from their developer team. They were like, hey, you provided us this recommendation for improving the page speed, but you haven't pointed out this one thing which also impacts page speed up to some level. And we were like, yes, because we don't think it's extremely impactful, right? Based on the objective that we have around these product pages to be improved and to improve their search performance, it's not impactful because page speed is going to be more of a directional metric. If you're looking at a page speed score from maybe page speed insights, this Google tool, or maybe Google's Lighthouse and stuff like that, they're going to point out almost everything that you can potentially fix. They're going to point out the should do stuff, right? They're going to point out the best practices. So, but is all of this really important? Definitely not, right? What you have to focus on is the stuff that will finally move the needle, which is directly tied to your objective. And then finally, when you're ready to implement stuff, you think about, is this really realistic? Would this actually be possible to pull off? If the answer is no, you just move on, because speed is what matters at the end of the day, and you don't want to be waiting. Now, the reason why I really think this framework is important is because if you think about any other SEO that you're competing with, right, you don't have a brain that they do not, right? You don't know a unique ranking factor of some sort that they don't have access to. So you have the same exact knowledge, at least that's what I would assume, normally speaking, right? As in, if I just talk to another SEO, and we're going to talk about the same ranking factors. I'm not going to talk about this one magical thing that I've found from this one particular Google patent or something, right? So our knowledge, roughly speaking, about what really matters, what drives the needle, is going to be the same. Secondly, you also won't have much of a competitive edge because of your experience, right? One could say, hey, I've worked more number of years than some other SEOs, but is it really true for your entire industry? Do you really think your competitor company cannot find someone with more experience than you? The answer is no, they can find anyone, right? If they just have the money, they can find someone with 20 years of experience, maybe someone who's the leading voice, who can run this program for them. So the knowledge is the same, the overall experience is the same. The only thing that you can have potentially an edge on is going to be I should be writing this in red. So the only thing where you have a potential competitive edge is going to be your methodology. Is it the right spelling? Anyways, so the right methodology is what really matters at the end of the day, because if you know the exact same stuff, if you have the same level of experience, but you just have a different worldview towards implementing things, right? You just take a different route. You're trying to achieve the same goal, but you just have a different methodology. You just have a different view of looking at the problem and coming up with a solution. That's where you're going to have an advantage. So imagine a competitor with the same exact knowledge, right? The same exact experience, but when it comes to methodology, they're like, hey, we should actually wait for the design team to give us the access that we need, and just like having 50 different versions of the landing pages that we want to create is going to be the best thing in the world. So why not wait a few months? And in the meantime, we can also clean up these 404 pages that we have on the site. We can go back and invest all of our resources towards fixing these, let's say, thousands of broken links that we have on the site. And it's important because, of course, it's I'm going to quote this Neil Patel's video where it says that this is something that you should do, right? Fixing broken links is something that you should work on potentially. But is it really going to move the needle? Is it really something that you can potentially work on? Is it practical to say that, hey, we really want you to take all of the folks that you have on our team, start fixing these broken links manually, or working on this program as a whole, where we have absolutely no justification of its connection with the objective that we're trying to achieve. In short, if you're a really smart SEO, if you know how to build programs, if you have the knowledge, you have the experience, you have really worked with companies, none of that will matter if you cannot do things, if you don't get the ball rolling. The teams that I've seen winning at organic search in the most efficient and effective way possible are the ones who are best when it comes to detecting what really matters and what can potentially be achieved, realistically speaking.